When I was a young lad growing up on a Sussex farm, I dreamt of being a gamekeeper or ghillie, and even tried my hand at taxidermy. In fact, I became none of these things, but I did eventually spend 20 years of my life keeping and breeding over 30 species of parrot. Amazons in particular proved a great attraction, not least because this group, which, generally speaking, is indigenous to South America, has over 27 species and 48 subspecies. Great variety of colour, shape and form being evident within the group. Well, I must say this is the best part of my job. I've raised the funds, hired the crew, and today I'm at Lora Park in the Canary Islands on Tenerife, which conveniently houses the most comprehensive collection of parrots ever assembled in modern times. In this programme, I've decided to split Amazon parrots into two specific groups. In Group A, we'll be looking at and studying those species that are well known in aviculture and whose populations are, generally speaking, stable in the wild. In Group B, we'll be looking at the birds whose numbers have seriously declined in recent years due to logging and efforts of mineral recovery. Therefore, their natural habitats have been destroyed, and some of these birds will only be able to be saved by breeding them in captivity, so aviculture can make a contribution to these birds. So, while Roger Sweeney, the park's curator, and Phil, my cameraman, go forth to film Amazon parrots for you, I will investigate the refreshments. Cheers. This 12-inch Amazon is my own personal favourite. Though not common in collections in the UK, and a protected species throughout its natural range, in the USA it can frequently be spotted in petrol stations and restaurants, being kept as a pet. In captivity, it has proven to be a reliable and prolific breeder, but can show aggressive tendencies during the breeding season. That said, it is not a behaviour pattern ever seen in my own birds. In the UK, almost all specimens offered for sale will have been captive bred, but again in the USA, wild-caught stock sometimes comes onto the market via government auctions of confiscated smuggled birds. When hand-reared, it will make for an interesting if strong-willed pet, but in my opinion, all available specimens should be paired where possible for breeding. Wild distribution is Hispaniola and the nearby islands of Beta, Soma, Grand Caymanite and Gonave. Introduced populations, probably from escaped pets, occur also in Puerto Rico, Calibra and the Virgin Islands. Number of eggs laid is generally 2 to 3, incubation period 24 to 25 days. At just 10 inches, this is the smallest of all Amazons. It has been frequently available to aviculturists over the last decade and is now firmly established in aviaries worldwide. Though not a first choice as a pet due to its temperament, even when hand-reared, as aviary subjects they are delightful, an attractive addition to any collection. For their size, these birds do well when housed in longer flights than some of their relations, perhaps say 10 feet. In the UK at least, these birds are early breeders, going to nest perhaps as much as 6 to 8 weeks before other Amazon species. In the wild, these birds enjoy a wide distribution covering Mexico, western Costa Rica, central western Mexico, northwestern Mexico and Guatemala. Number of eggs generally 2 to 3, incubation period 23 to 24 days. In my experience, this is not a bird often found in aviaries, especially in the UK. At 10 inches, it is the same size as its near relative, the whitefront, and displays most of the same characteristics. Its rarity value, however, gives it a far higher price tag. Hand-reared specimens will make reasonable pets, but in my opinion, its best interests are served by allowing it aviary accommodation. Wild distribution is Yucatan Peninsula, southeastern Mexico, and Honduras. Number of eggs being laid 2 to 3, incubation period 22 to 23 days. Once a much prized and available pet species, especially in the USA, the green-cheeked is now established as a firm aviary favourite, where it breeds readily in satisfactory numbers. A native of Mexico, where it is fully protected, the 13-inch Amazon is a colourful and engaging member of its group. Imported wild-caught specimens today are likely to have found their way onto the market from Guyana, whilst others mysteriously take up residence in the USA via the Mexican border. Its wild distribution is restricted to northeastern Mexico. Number of eggs generally 2, incubation period 25 to 26 days. It is pleasing to report that this 12-inch Amazon is, even now, still abundant within its range. Free breeding in captivity, hand-reared specimens make excellent pet or aviary birds. Mainly due to aviculture, the species remains reasonably available at a relatively modest price. Distribution in the wild being western Mexico. Number of eggs generally 2, incubation period 25 to 26 days. This is a bird with several subspecies, and we can look at them all here. Their general characteristics are, however, much the same, and their availability to the aviculturist, though variable, is, as with the size of 12 inches, much the same. Most of the group, with the possible exception of the diademed, are now firmly established in aviaries, and cannot be considered exactly rare. They breed freely and will, when treated with love, make reasonably good pets. Distribution for the nominate race is eastern Mexico down into Nicaragua. Number of eggs is 2 to 3, incubation 25 to 26 days. The remaining subspecies being the Salvin's Amazon, endemic to southeastern Nicaragua, eastern and southwestern Costa Rica, western Colombia and northwestern Venezuela. Leucocephala Amazon, limited to western Ecuador. And the diademed Amazon, confined to northwestern Brazil. Lack of bright coloration and general availability make this one of the less seen Amazon species. Nevertheless, it is important to ensure that the few specimens that are sometimes available are bred from. Imports of this bird to the UK ceased some years ago, but it is still sometimes possible to locate aged pet birds and persuade the owners to part with them. Since most parrot species can reproduce well into middle age and beyond, breeding from such birds remains a strong possibility. About 13 inches in size, festive Amazons occur over a wide natural range, taking in eastern Ecuador, northeastern Peru, and southeastern Colombia to the eastern Amazonas of Brazil. A subspecies, Bodin's Amazon, was imported into the UK in small numbers during the late 80s. More colourful than the nominate race, these birds were highly sought after by collectors, originating through Guyana. Not many of these birds survived, which means captive populations in the UK at least must be minimal. In the wild, Bodin's appears stable throughout its range of northwestern Guyana and central Venezuela west to Meta River. For both species, number of eggs 2 to 3, incubation 26 to 28 days. Without doubt, this is the most widely recognised of all Amazon parrots. Kept as a pet for decades, it makes both a reasonable talker and, especially where the yellow-winged subspecies is concerned, a colourful companion. Even wild-caught specimens, after a time, achieve a degree of trust and tameness towards their owners, but these days such birds should be avoided in favour of a domestically bred alternative. Blue fronts are today prolifically bred in aviaries, and both young and adults may be easily located. Price-wise, this 14-inch bird also represents one of the better buys within the world of parrots. Blue fronts are widespread and appear stable throughout their wild range of eastern Brazil. The more colourful subspecies, the yellow-winged Amazon, being found throughout northern and eastern Bolivia, Paraguay and northern Argentina. It would be virtually impossible to present you, my viewers, with the definitive picture of this group of Amazons within this film without an extra hour's running time. Opinions vary greatly as to the number of valid subspecies, and their geographical range produces numerous possible options. Confusion abounds. So for our purposes, we shall rely on the listings and range and habitats given in Rosemary Lowe's excellent book, Parrots, Their Care and Breeding, and my own experience of keeping and breeding virtually all of the birds you're about to see, including Tres Marie. All members of the Leucocephala group, and this yellow-crowned Amazon is a member of that species, make splendid aviary birds and delightful pets. They're tame and confiding, particularly this one, which is a hand-reared bird. And within aviculture, they're stable and bred in very, very good numbers. They also make excellent talking birds, even rivaling that particular ability of the African grey, the legendary African grey. Lovely. As with all parrots in general, the brighter the coloration, the higher the cost. In my own experience, incubation was 26 to 28 days for all species. So now let me present to you Amazona Leucocephala in all its glory. First, the yellow-fronted Amazon. Listed Appendix 2, as are all species within this group, its size is 14 inches. Extensive range of this bird in the wild, taking in the eastern Andes of Colombia to the Guianas and Venezuela. It is also found on Trinidad. The Panama yellow-fronted Amazon has a size of 12 inches, with a wild habitat of Panama, lowlands of northern Colombia and east of the Santa Marta region. Natura's Amazon, size 14 inches, wild habitat, northwestern Mato Grosso region of Brazil, southeastern Colombia, eastern Ecuador and Peru. Marajó Amazon, size 14 inches, wild habitat, Marajó Island, located at the mouth of the Amazon, northern Brazil and the Parrot River. Yellow-naped Amazon, size 14 inches, natural habitat, southern Mexico, northwestern Costa Rica and northern Honduras. Parvipes Amazon, size 14 inches, natural habitat, Honduras and Nicaragua. Wake up, because just when you thought you'd seen all the species in Part 1, and it's the same again in Part 2, here's the one about which most controversy lies. Not least because, as the birds get older, they get more yellow, and just everyone wants a real Tres Marie, which of course has the most yellow and a blue wash to its breast. Airbrushing birds is not allowed, so look, decide and enjoy the double yellow-headed in all its liveries. The double yellow-headed Amazon, size 14 inches. Wild habitat, the Gulf slopes of Mexico, from southern Tamaulipas and Nuevo León to Tabasco, and on the Pacific coast from Colima south to Osaka. Double yellow-headed Amazon, Amazona Leucocephala magna, size is 15 inches, wild habitat, Atlantic slopes of Mexico to eastern Tabasco. Double yellow-headed Amazon, Amazona Leucocephala Tres Marie, size 15 inches, wild habitat, the Tres Marias Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Double yellow-headed Amazon, Amazona, Leucocephala, Belenenses, size 15 inches, wild habitat, Belize. Orange wings vary greatly in size, anything from 10 to 13 inches, dependent on wild origins. Coloration also differs widely. They are freely available, having been imported for years in vast numbers, notably from Guyana. Nowadays, thankfully, aviculturists have taken an interest in the species and, being one of the cheaper Amazons, give the novice breeder an economical way to start a collection. Though abundant in the wild, in my own experience, these birds didn't breed as readily in captivity as some other species, but other breeders report a totally different story. I imagine, as with all birds, compatibility is the key. As pets, they are delightful and playful, especially where hand-reared specimens are concerned. Orange wings inhabit a vast area of South America and some offshore islands. This includes Colombia, Venezuela, Guyanas, eastern Ecuador, eastern Peru, northern Bolivia, Brazil, southwestern Mato Grosso and Panama, and for good measure, Tobago and Trinidad also. Number of eggs, usually 2 to 3, incubation 25 to 26 days. Few aviculturists possess this bird, and its plain plumage will probably ensure that this state of affairs will continue. Though reported to be a delight when hand-reared, it is unlikely to be a bird encountered by any but the serious collector, the few specimens that do become available frequently being mistaken for juvenile mealies. Distribution: northwestern Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru and northern Bolivia. Eggs probably 2 to 3, incubation 25 to 26 days. This is the largest of all mainland Amazons at 15 inches. It is common throughout its extensive natural range of southern Mexico, most of northern South America, east of the Andes, to northern Bolivia and central eastern Brazil. It is still imported in considerable numbers. The popularity as a pet is due more to its cuddly personality than its visual appeal. Like the orange wing, this bird has a relatively low price tag and is therefore another excellent option for starting an Amazon collection. Once adult, it can prove a vigorous and demonstrative breeder. A number of subspecies are claimed, visually basically differing in the amount or lack of yellow feathers in the crown. The most valid of these is undoubtedly the blue-crowned Amazon. Unlike the nominate race, this bird is rare in collections. This, combined with a highly attractive blue wash to the crown, provides the species with collector status, and its price considerably higher than for the nominate race reflects this fact. Range of the blue-crowned Amazon is southern Mexico through Guatemala to Honduras. Number of eggs, nominate and subspecies 2 to 3. Incubation 26 to 28 days.
So here we are, back again. Well, I hope you enjoyed your journey through the species of Amazon parrot as much as we did. Not quite as much as my film cameraman Phil did, because he was actually attacked by a bird defending its nest box. But basically speaking, he's got 2 arms, now he's only got 1, but I don't mind as long as he can operate the camera. In the meantime, let me say, Amazon parrots make absolutely wonderful pets, and especially when hand-reared. So taking my parrot plant here, I shall wander off and we'll go through the aspects of that particular situation.
So, let's first consider some aspects of the Amazon in your home. First, purchase your intended pet bird with care. Avoid buying a wild-caught specimen if at all possible. Such birds will, in all probability, have endured several unpleasant encounters with man. First at the point of capture, then through the holding station in the country of origin, shipped to a wholesaler, then passed to a dealer, and finally into your home via a pet shop. It doesn't sound too good to me. Understandably, such a bird, although probably only half the price of a domestically bred specimen, will resist interaction with its new owner. So, seek out a genuine breeder and obtain a hand-reared domestically bred bird. Such a bird should be able to eat on its own. I do not recommend that unless you have previous experience with hand-rearing, you take the bird from the breeder prior to weaning. Such a person can of course be located through the Secretary of the Amazonas Society. There are some reliable and reputable pet shops and dealers, but they are a rare breed. At the very least, your new purchase should be close rung and come with a certificate of hatch and health. Naturally, not all genuine hobbyist breeders will supply printed certificates, but at the very least demand a written and signed receipt declaring the bird captive bred, fit and healthy, and its ring number. It's common in the USA for even domestically bred birds to be taken to an avian veterinarian immediately after purchase for a complete health screening. A clear result gives total peace of mind to the new owner. In basic terms, such an examination should consist of a physical examination and the taking of blood and fecal samples. In Part 2, we'll go into this procedure in greater depth. The major problem in the UK is locating a veterinarian who knows one end of a bird from another, but help is at hand. Cage and Avery Birds now publish an annual avian supplement listing bird-interested vets nationwide. Naturally, the Americans do it better and have the Association of Avian Veterinarians. In any event, it would be wise to keep any new bird isolated from other household pets or aviary birds until the results from the tests are known. Not having these tests carried out will always put any birds you already own at risk. It's all down to you. An essential item of equipment for the pet parrot owner is of course a cage. Not just any old cage, but one of suitable size and construction. And here is one, complete with an Amazon. Being on casters, it can be moved easily from room to room. Its size allows for several perches to be provided. The bird has sufficient space to move around, and the provision of toys will keep him or her occupied whilst you're away and otherwise engaged. Parrots are highly sociable, so locate the cage in the family room or a place of high activity. The worst place is really the kitchen, as cooking smells and smoke can be highly toxic for your bird, and greasy feathers more than unpleasant. The perches should be natural and of diminishing circumference in order to exercise your bird's feet. They should be replaced at least weekly, chewed through or not. My first choice is pine, but any fruit tree or willow makes suitable alternatives. They should not be too thin. The feet should always be able to go round about 3/4 of the way. OK, let's look at these toys. Well made, colourful, robust construction, acrylic, which is virtually unchewable, and best of all, easy to clean. An essential fixture in your pet parrot's home. Provide several for variety. Water must be changed every day, more often in warmer climates. Where your main supply is not filtered, I recommend giving bottled water, which is especially financially viable for just a few pet birds. All birds kept generally indoors must be sprayed at least twice a week to substitute the rain otherwise enjoyed by wild and aviary inhabitants. A simple handheld plant spray filled with tepid water will do just fine. Don't be afraid to give your pet a good dousing, but not to the point where he or she is waterlogged. Right, pet parrots suffer from all sorts of different problems, just as we do. This particular pet parrot here, as you can see, disobeyed me earlier. And look what happened. So now we're going to see if this particular pet parrot here, called Manolito, wants to go the same way. Probably not, but we'll see. Anyway, two things that happen to pet parrots is that they get overgrown fingernails, and they also have overgrown wings. Well, their wings aren't really overgrown, but they do get fully flighted, and consequently, if they're frightened or become upset for any reason, they might suddenly take off their perch and bang, crash into a window. So we don't want that to happen. And for that reason, I've always recommended with pet birds to have one wing clipped. We'll leave the last 3 feathers here, the primaries we call them, and then we'll clip from about there, not on me of course, but on the parrot, right the way down to like what we call the elbow, just about that little bit here. And I'll try and give you an actual physical demonstration of this any moment now. on this particular bird here. How can we have a go at that? One of the other quick problems is that the claws become too long through the fact that they're not really exercising their feet as much as they should do. It's just a trait that they have. What one has to be careful of is that when you are cutting off those little tips, you don't want to cut more than just absolutely the little bit on the end, because a blood vein goes all the way down that claw, and if you do go too deep down, then you'll get bleeding. If you do get bleeding, it isn't a major problem, because what you can do is you can do one of two things. You can put on it a silver nitrate point, otherwise known as a styptic pencil, and it looks like this. It looks like a bit like a submarine, actually. And if we open this up, here we are, and there it is, and you just simply put that on the parrot's foot like this, give it a little rub round, and there we are, and it will stop. The alternative, which you'll also see in real life possibly in a moment, is to use something like this, which is a wound dressing powder. It comes from your veterinarian, and just a little bit of that on the end. You see, I'm demonstrating this on my finger at the moment, and you hold that, press it about 8 seconds, count to 8, and away you go. The bleeding will have stopped. So that was simple enough to do on myself. Now we'll see what Manolito thinks. One of the other things that you can do, by the way, with overgrown toenails, and we'll see what she thinks about this, not a lot I don't think, is to take a claw and to just gradually file it like this. There you are. She's fighting me a bit, but that's okay. You're okay. Come on. You see what I mean? You get the idea. Now if it's a hand-raised bird, this is no problem at all. You can cuddle it in a lap, do what you want with it. This bird is an adult. It's probably about 23 years old, and as tame as it is, it's not actually quite used to that. You can pick it up, put it in a towel, and do the same sort of procedure. Now, what we're going to do now is to see... No, she won't. So what we're going to have to do, and it will never forgive me, is we're going to have to capture it off its perch, but we'll do it as gently as we can, wrap it in a nice towel, and then we'll go through the procedure of clipping a wing. Now, we've tried this once or twice before this afternoon, and I've ended up practically decapitated. But just for your pleasure and your knowledge and my displeasure and grief and pain, here we go again. Hello. Right. Now then, the thing is that if you were... Look at that. Isn't that nice? And there we are, you see. Absolutely no problem. The big old towel goes round like that. There we are there. And then somewhere along the line here, we will find the wing. There is the wing there, as you can see. We've got the parrot nicely captured up. We need to cut the feathers from here to here. We need to leave the last 3 here and cut these primary. These are the primary feathers here. And if we're quick about it, we'll be able to do it like this. There we are. That's lovely. Yeah, last one there. There we are. And we've done it. So that what actually happens is that... Whoops. No, you don't need to bite me now. You can see the effect that we've got there. Okay? Now, what actually has occurred is the bird, when the wing folds back, as you can see, doesn't look unpleasant. But in truth, if the bird tries to fly across this room now, it won't be able to do it. It'll sort of flop about and come to earth quite gently. No problem at all. She's a bit cross with me, but not too cross. There we are. That's how you clip a wing.
Finally, Amazons can be very noisy, particularly early in the morning and toward late evening, reflecting their natural dawn chorus and the establishment of the nighttime roosting site, this trait becoming more pronounced as breeding age approaches. But then it's perhaps time to set your pet up in an aviary and let nature take its course. Fortunately, unlike in times past, today there are a number of nutritionally balanced diets available to the pet parrot owner. At a basic level, it is necessary to provide a mixture of seeds, nuts, vegetables and fruits. Such a diet will consist of and be prepared in the following manner. We'll take whole sunflower, 1 part, safflower, 1 part, maize, 1/2 part, pine nuts, 1/2 part, peanuts, 1/2 part, and 1/2 part mixed millets. To this will be added diced fruits, such as apple, orange, and vegetables, such as carrots, raw beetroot, and cauliflower stalks, because most fruit and vegetables, safe for humans, are safe for parrots also. Variety is the key.
Mixed together, the seed and fruit and vegetable combinations provide a perfect transfer medium for powdered mineral supplements, necessary when feeding birds a choose what you will diet, because, like children, parrots pick the bits they like, not what does them good. The problems are overcome when supplying a commercially prepared alternative. This type of diet eliminates the need for messy seeds entirely and can be fed as a sole food source. However, up to 20% of a bird's daily intake can also be supplied in the form of fruit and vegetables. Either way, your pet bird's diet core program will be satisfied. Obviously, where you're going to pair your now mature domestically bred pet, a bird of similar age should be sought. Being a member of a specialist society is helpful in this area, since breeders of your species can be located. The great advantage of beginning a breeding program with captive bred specimens is that unrelated birds are paired. Their health status is known, and such birds are known to breed at an earlier age than their wild-caught counterparts. The major disadvantage is the time waiting for the birds to reach sexual maturity, 3 to 4 years in most species. Mostly, however, the choice is made for you. Rare species only being available as current year bred, and only common varieties still available and obtainable as wild-caught mature adults. However, whatever the origin of your birds might have been, buy only from people whose premises you can visit. Admittedly today, persistent theft of parrots, virtually unpunished by the authorities, has meant that many genuine breeders disposing of surplus stock do so through dealers and specialist parrot brokers. But still, whoever sells you the bird or birds should be able to present you with some history, health certification, and a guarantee of satisfaction. From time to time, genuine breeding pairs of Amazons do come onto the market, perhaps because the owner is going out of the hobby or changing to a different species. In such case, at least, a breeding record card showing dates of lay and hatch ought to be available to the purchaser. Unproven pairs should be offered with a certificate of surgical or DNA sexing and carry permanent leg bands with numbers corresponding to the paperwork. In the absence of either, it is advisable to engage in the procedures outlined in veterinary procedures. The same plan being followed also with single birds. The temperament of Amazon parrots varies from species to species, though pairing 2 birds together generally follows the same or similar patterns. With luck, the newly introduced pair will bond together and agree with your choice within their arranged marriage. Others will tolerate but not mate with their provided partner, and this is a state of affairs which can continue for as long as such birds are housed together. Total incompatibility, where 2 birds of the opposite sex are introduced to each other, is fairly immediate, with one or the other assuming attack mode within minutes. Any ideas of keeping such birds together should be abandoned forthwith and new partners provided. Like all parrots, even compatible proven pairs will demonstrate aggressive behaviour when in breeding condition, though this is usually toward the keeper rather than the mate. On occasion, however, the cock will attain breeding fitness before the hen, and fighting will then occur. This can be a particular problem with species such as the yellow-shouldered, and close and frequent monitoring of such pairs is essential. Naturally, it's going to depend on where in the world you're located when best to introduce either a domestically bred bird or a wild-caught specimen to an outside aviary. Year-round release in a tropical climate would probably be fine, but in the UK at least, no bird previously kept in a controlled environment should be put in an outside flight until May or June. Thereafter, the bird or birds will acclimatise, annually growing a thick and protective underdown in late autumn, in preparation for the coming winter. Whether you're just starting up as a breeder or already have an established collection, new birds should be subject to a thorough veterinary check and a period of quarantine. For sure, few of us keep to the 10 Commandments, but if you follow my advice to the letter, much possible future grief will be avoided. 1. Take all new purchases immediately to an experienced avian veterinarian. 2. Instruct said vet person to carry out A thorough physical examination to include eyes, ears and mouth, plus examination of the feathers for feather disorders and malnutrition. B. A blood test. Much about your bird's health will be revealed to the veterinarian by this procedure, and it is an essential element of even the most basic veterinary exam. And C. Bacterial and fungal cultures should also be taken at this time, the latter revealing diseases such as Candida, Mucor and Aspergillus. D. No veterinary exam would be complete without testing for Psittacosis. Birds can carry this disease for years without showing signs of illness, and it can pass to people. Fortunately, the problem, if diagnosed, is treatable, unlike many diseases and viruses that attack parrots. In the case of rare and or endangered species, most, though not all of which carry extremely high price tags, radiology is also advised. Because they have air sacs, birds provide us with the perfect anatomy for X-rays, and it is possible to clearly observe all the major organs, including the brain, sinuses, trachea, crop, heart, lungs, intestinal tract, spleen, air sacs and reproductive organs. Finally, birds that have been previously housed in earth-floored outdoor aviaries should be wormed as a matter of routine, by either the veterinarian during his health screening or by you, the new owner, on returning home to your facility. My personal choice is to add biazine to the drinking water for 3 days, having previously allowed your bird or birds 1 dry day at the beginning of the cycle. Half a teaspoonful to 1 quart of water is the recommended dose. Apart from being monomorphic, that is, both sexes appear exactly the same, almost all members of the parrot family, and Amazons are no exception, can demonstrate flexisexual behaviour, confusing even the most experienced keeper as to gender. Fortunately, in the last 2 decades, the advent of surgical sexing by means of endoscopy has provided the aviculturists with the means not only to discover a bird's sex, but also its state of maturity and general internal health. This procedure allows also for the examination of the bird's cloaca for evidence of papillomas. The minor operation itself takes but a few moments in the hands of an experienced veterinarian. After catching up the bird's head is inserted into a rubber cap attached to a gas line emitting isoflurane in air. A few seconds later, the bird is unconscious and ready for the procedure. A few feathers are removed from the appropriate place and an antiseptic applied. A small incision is then made, either with a scalpel or sharp-ended scissors. The probe is inserted between the site of the 7th and 8th ribs, allowing the vet not only to determine the bird's sex, but also close and detailed examination of other major internal organs, including the air sacs. The hole resulting from the operation is extremely small, and the surrounding muscle tissue will close after the procedure is completed. However, my preference, and also that of our veterinarian, Andrew Greenwood, is to put a single stitch in place which in time dissolves. Birds as young as 6 weeks can be sexed in this way. Food and water should be withdrawn at least 4 hours prior to sexing. Not to do so may result in an enlarged proventriculus, which will interfere with the approach of the probe and obscure the visual location and condition of other organs other than the ovaries and or testes. Fasting the patient also reduces the risk of suffocation as a result of a bird regurgitating during the operation. Once sex has been determined, the birds may be rung with an open stainless steel band, usually on the right for cocks, left for the hens. An alternative is colour-coded bands, black for cocks, gold for hens. At the same time as the surgical sexing procedure is taking place, it is not only possible but highly advisable to microchip implant the bird. Once in place, this cannot be removed and provides lifetime proof identification of ownership. Readers, as seen in our film, are now available at a seriously reasonable cost and, in my opinion, are an essential item of equipment for even the most modest sized collection. The other major advantage being the ability to test read any bird you are about to add to your collection. So, there we are, surgical sexing simply explained. But some of you may not, in spite of my assurances that the procedure is quick, easy and relatively pain-free, feel happy to subject your bird to the procedure. The alternative is sex determination by DNA, though this is a method which won't tell you the condition of your bird's internal organs. Age is no barrier, and even chicks in the nest can be tested. All that's needed is a small drop of blood, taken usually from the toe, dropped into a phial and mailed off to the lab. Me, I'll stick with the surgical sexing. Like all parrots and humans too, Amazons can and do suffer from physical disabilities. Whilst this in general is nothing to be alarmed about, it is important to know not only what these ailments might be, but also to be alerted to the necessary action the keeper should take. Mostly, a domestically bred specimen will have a clean bill of health, but this is not always the case. Hopefully, following our recommended veterinary procedures, you will have prevented such an occurrence. Still, problems do occur, and with wild-caught birds, these are particularly important to investigate when illness appears. In parrots in particular, this can present the observer with a myriad of difficulties, since predator-aware, inbuilt defence systems come into place immediately a bird senses illness. The result is that your parrot can be sick for a prolongated period of time before you, the keeper, notices something is amiss. In that time, untold damage may have occurred, so rapid remedial therapy is required. The old adage, if in doubt, get your vet out, applies. Laura Park, of course, has its own full-time veterinary staff, the bird section of which is headed by Dr. Frank Enders. So I thought we'd take this opportunity to ask Frank a few questions related to Amazon health. Frank, tell me something. What is the most common health problem you see in this species?
I would say one of the most common non-infectious problems is the problem of obesity. The Amazons tend to become very fat in a short time if they live in a cage, because they're going to pick up just these parts of the food which are very rich in fat, so like the sunflower or some peanuts, and so if they're sitting in the cage they get fat very quick.
Would that apply to them in aviaries as well? I mean, this is a dietary problem, isn't it?
At first it is a dietary problem. If you feed them on an all-seed diet, or just, which is even worse, on a sunflower diet, then they will pick up these things, of course. If you switch to a produced diet, which is just a pelleted food, then they get all the things they need in a very strong relation, and they're not able to choose these things which are maybe high on energy but not producing a very healthy bird, at least. And so on a commercial produced diet, I would think they are much better. And the second problem is that they need a lot of space. They should go out of the cage whenever they have time, and they need to be more active.
Right, right. Now we hear something. We hear a lot about something called cloacal papillomas. Is this a common problem in Amazons, and exactly what is it?
The cloacal papillomas is a disease which is produced by a virus, a polyoma virus, and the virus causes some discharge on the skin on the cloaca, and the papillomas is an overgrowing of this skin, and obviously it causes an infection there in the cloaca. It causes it's very painful for the birds, and yeah, the treatment is not so easy for it.
Right.
If you have it in the Amazons, they of course can't, they are infertile because the sperms are not able to move through these infected cloaca. You have to take the bird to clean it out very closely and taking away the dead tissue and put some anti-inflammatory ointment on it.
Can this be cured over a period of time totally, or is it something that reoccurs?
It's quite often reoccurring. You can heal it with the treatment, but it's often that it will, after some months, reoccur.
I see. Okay. And finally, psittacosis or chlamydia. That's something that sort of worries everybody because I believe this can be passed to humans. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the chlamydiosis is a very severe disease, especially in parrots. And as you taught, it can pass to the people, and if it is non-diagnosed, it can cause severe health problems also in men, going about pain in the joints and fever, and finally with heart problems and something else. If you have it on a bird, clinical ill bird will have some signs like a rhinitis, blepharitis. They will have wet eyes. They are very depressed, rough feathers sitting in the cage, and all the time if you see a bird like this, it's very wise to give him a checkup, go to a veterinarian to have it checked whether it's shedding chlamydia.
But I believe this is something that is curable. You can actually do something about this problem.
Yeah, that's it. If you diagnose it on the right time, and normally the disease, if it is acute, will develop very, very quick signs, and if you go in this state inside and treat it with the right antibiotic, then you will get, after some days, the bird back to a normal state. But at least you have to treat it for a much longer time to be sure that none of the chlamydia is shedding any longer.
And how long a period would you say that would take place over?
The normal treatment period is about several weeks to treat it in the food, but if you treat it with a long-acting antibiotic, you need also some weeks to give the injections every week.
And finally, when the bird appears to be cured, you can obviously test that bird, can you, and see that it's...
You can test the birds in the state if they are shedding. You can test the cloaca, and you can test also the blood for having antibodies in the bird.
And the treatments, in the case of psittacosis or chlamydia, when the treatment has run its full course, we can be sure that bird is cured and the problem won't come back again.
You can be sure that the bird is cured. The other thing is that sometimes, because the chlamydia are living intracellular,
yes,
they can stay in place for a longer time, and in very rare cases they can also coming out if the birds are stressed again. But this is not common. Normally it disappears with the treatment.
Fine, that's lovely. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
In conclusion, the maintenance of closed aviaries of parrots is the ideal. Of course, this philosophy is incompatible with joint management of species and the pairing of unrelated birds. Nevertheless, it appears that diseases like macaw wasting syndrome is increasing in captive parrot populations, and any established breeding collection would do well not to add to its numbers from unknown sources unless absolutely necessary, and in these cases to quarantine and test incoming birds exhaustively. The expense of such procedure should be well repaid in time. One alternative would be to set up a system of certifying collections as free of certain diseases. In the absence of definitive tests, this can be difficult, but it should be possible to a limited degree if certain criteria are met. A. All parrot chicks and eggs dying in the collection should be examined by post-mortem by a competent laboratory with a knowledge of parrot diseases. B. All sick birds and chicks should be examined clinically and accurate diagnosis made as far as is possible. C. All birds should be tested regularly for those diseases for which tests are available and clinically examined for signs of others on an annual basis. D. Records should be kept of offspring from the collection, their designation and eventual causes of death. E. There should have been no incoming birds during the period covered by certification. Infection disease represents a major threat to the viability of captive parrot populations,
in a way that is probably unique in the avian world. Tremendous efforts are being made to come to grips with these problems, prompted, it has to be said, by the economic pressures of American aviculture rather than by the efforts of zoos. Nevertheless, complete success and security are clearly somewhere in the future, and it is vigilance now which will ensure that we have breeding birds and offspring within aviculture for the future. For my sins, as British readers will know, I'm parrot expert for Birdkeeper magazine. In this role, I receive many letters, not all of them rude, and I receive them every month, asking a wide variety of questions related to the keeping of parrots, both as pets and as aviary subjects. Here, for your enlightenment, are some of those questions, and some of the answers that I've given. Question number 1. Do parrots in an outside aviary need heat? Answer, no. But a draft-free shelter is essential. Some Amazons will do better in a more enclosed flight than some other species, such as cockatoos, who seem not to care whether it's raining, sunning, or doing all sorts of other things that the English weather does. So there we are. No need for any heat in an outdoor aviary. Question number 2. Can Amazons be kept and bred on a colony system? The answer to that is not a good idea at all. Amazons are highly territorial, so in my opinion this is not desirable and not something you should try. No doubt someone somewhere will immediately write to me and say, but we've been doing that for years. And my answer is, well, I'm sure you have, but I still wouldn't advise it. So there you are. I won't hold my breath waiting for that particular letter. Flocking unpaired or young birds in a communal aviary, however, is a possibility, and that would be an entirely different proposition. But once sexual maturity is reached, then definitely one pair per aviary. We'll turn over, and the next question is this. Could I keep 1 or 2 Amazons with a mixed collection, like an odd canary or an Uslan bird or an emu or something like that? The short answer to that is definitely not. Not advisable unless the aviary is of considerable size, like you might see in one of the major zoos. The larger the size, the less problem you'll have with birds coming together close proximity. As we said before, they're territorial, so definitely not. 1 pair per aviary. Another often asked question is, what colour should my parrot's droppings be? They don't always use the term droppings, but we will in this programme because it's fit for the family, classified A. Now that would depend on what kind of diet you're feeding your bird. If you've watched the diet section, you've seen we've talked about all sorts of different types of diet. Giving a seed diet and mixed up with some fruit, you'd expect the overall proposition to be dark green. That is, the faeces in general, what we might call the stool, whilst the urates, which is the white part, should be flaky white. So you've got a nice dark, sort of Lincolnish, darkish green with a nice white eye to it. However, if you're feeding your parrot on a new advanced diet, one of those pelleted diets we looked at earlier, or even later according to which part of the programme it's in, and I've overlooked to remember that, then it's quite possible that the basic part of the drop-in would be quite light in colour, quite beige, but the urate should still remain flaky white. Okay, another question here, very important. Will 2 different species of Amazon mate and successfully produce offspring? Well, the answer to that is yes, they most certainly will, rather like people. But generally speaking, the practice is frowned on by purists. And as I have to say, it isn't something I would recommend myself. I think wherever possible, we should keep species pure. The idea of crossbreeding Amazons has been practiced by breeders. One of the most famous and successful breeders in the UK did it for years, sold all the offspring off into the trade. The problem is now that a lot of confusion as to exactly what the species are does exist, because as with human beings, the offspring can take the characteristics of one parent or the other, so that if you have black and white people mixing, some of the children can be white, some can be black. Same thing happens with parrots. It's not something I think we actually need to do. It may keep those birds sexually active, but I think we'll give them a skipping rope instead, and we'll overlook that crossbreeding type of thing. Right. Now then, do captive bred birds make good breeding stock, or do they imprint on the breeder stroke hand rearer? Well, here we're talking parrots, and Amazons in particular. We're not talking birds of prey. It happens apparently in birds of prey quite frequently. The birds become useless, totally useless for breeding. They certainly can't hunt in the wild and therefore sustain life. But parrots are totally different. It is true that hand-raised captive-bred stock not only come to sexual maturity earlier, but make steady and consistent breeders over and above their wild-caught the wild-caught stock. So it is important, and it's a good thing here that although you'll have to wait a little longer to begin your hand-rearing career, that captive-bred hand-reared specimens should be sought when setting up your hand-rearing or when your breeding facility. Little mistake there, but even Julia Somerville makes one now and again. So there we are, that's answered that question. Pet Amazons. It is said that long-term pet Amazons are difficult to breed with. The question is that true? And it's definitely not true. Whilst some Amazon parrots can have difficulty in adjusting after having been locked up in a cage in some smoke-filled, scruffy little room for 20 years, it is true that if you take these birds, gradually acclimatise them, get them used to Avery life, give them a good, proper, well-balanced diet, yes, their sexual desires will eventually surface and can be bred from. And the good news is that even in very aged specimens, reproduction has been observed. Parrots, after all, can breed probably into their late 50s and early 60s. So, you know, if you've got a rare parrot, if you find a rare parrot, you can find one to go with it. The age is really immaterial. They will go on doing it for a long time. What time of year do Amazons go to nest? Well, generally, January to March. Some species, like the white-fronted Amazon, nest readily and very early, somewhere around January, whereas something like the yellow-crowned, the Leucocephala group, will tend to start their breeding activity in March. However, it must be said, because of the advanced avian practices taking place today, it is possible to encourage, in fact stimulate, parrots to breed consistently throughout the year. It's a lot to do with diet, the availability of good food, and also with temperature control. So there you have it. Right. Now then, what signs should you be looking for regarding breeding activity? Well, obvious signs are copulation, which is when one's doing it to the other one, in case you didn't know that, mademoiselle. Mutual preening, especially of the vent areas, and the cock feeding the hen. Though in some cases, especially with Amazon parrots, this will never be observed. They seem to keep a complete distance from each other whilst being observed. And as soon as you go round the corner, they go boof, and they've done it, you see, without you being able to see. The answer to that, of course, is to install little cameras into your nest box, and then you can watch it all taking place. And finally, from a pet owner, who said to me, at certain times of the year, my Amazon gets sick on me. You don't get sick on me, do you? No. Now, this worried me a lot, especially the first time it happened. The answer to that is, generally, regurgitation of food occurs when the bird's decided it wants to mate. And it'll be happy to mate with you, or try and mate with you, its human owner, as it would someone of similar species. It's simply trying to feed you. So it's breaking up the food, and then it's, yes, it is sticking it out in order to put it into your mouth. I have tried it. It's not overly pleasant, but not something I'd recommend either. But from your parrot's point of view, it simply is nothing to worry about. So there we are. Some questions and answers. And on to the next round. The bogeyman cometh. The Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food and CITES, which is the Washington Convention on Endangered Species. As with most aspects of life, parrot keeping is the victim of numerous rules and regulations. Many now existing were implemented to preserve and protect the wild populations from the excesses of so-called commercial trading. But, like so many well-intentioned actions, the results have not always been beneficial to the well-being of parrot populations as a whole. In my personal opinion, limited trade should continue to be made possible, if only to allow breeders the opportunity to introduce new bloodlines to those already existing in captivity. Mass imports for the pet trade are, however, no longer necessary, and no one today seriously concerned for the well-being and continued existence of parrots as a race would endorse its continuation. What we need to do is to work with the people of the producing countries, managing population levels and trade in what is, after all, their natural resource, not ours. It is not necessary to possess any form of license to own an endangered parrot. However, should you do so and wish to publicly display, sell or loan such a bird, you will need an exemption certificate. These are issued by the Department of the Environment and in the USA by Fish and Wildlife. In the UK, the staff are extremely helpful, extremely helpful to say the least. But in other countries, in particular the USA, this is not necessarily the case. Proof of captive breeding by way of a closed ring and certificate stating date of purchase, breeder and origin of parent stock are helpful, but not essential. A written statement from the seller will be required where this information is not in existence. Originally, wild-caught birds represent an altogether different proposition, and in some cases, even where two keepers located on different continents have possessed seriously endangered specimens, with the will to bring the two birds together, government bureaucracy has prevented this from happening. In any event, all birds for import or export will also require Ministry of Agriculture, Fish and Food certificates. EU rules change consistently and are confusing to even those administering them. Fortunately, however, once again, the staff here are more than helpful. Importing a bird from abroad appears at first sight to be simple and straightforward. In reality, it is not. The paperwork seems to grow by the day, and the most wildlife departments are seriously understaffed, so patience and a long life expectancy are essential for both you and for the bird. Finally, remember, it is the seller who has the legal obligation to provide you, the buyer, with all necessary paperwork, and if this is not available, negate the transaction. The DOE will provide, at no charge, listings of species category. So there we have it, Amazon Parrots Part 1. I hope you enjoyed it, because we put a lot of effort into making it. And all these people are clapping here because they're so enjoying this particular show. And with luck, you'll be joining me on Part 2. But in the meantime, I'm going to watch this parrot show at Laurel Park. See you later.